This is another video showing how to use VueJS with GraphQL, Vue Composition API, Apollo Composables, and the latest version of Vue, which is Vue3. I have an older video from back in April that I did covering this. This one's going to be updated using the official release of Vue3 and the official release of the Vue Ionic components. So I'll link this video in the new video, but let's get at it. So first of all, we need to have a GraphQL server. So to get a GraphQL server, we are going to use this tool, which I have included in the README for the project, called JSON GraphQL Server. And so here, let's kind of go to the link for it. Here it is, JSON GraphQL Server. It gets a full fake GraphQL API in less than 30 seconds of coding. I'm going to start the, where is the install for this guy? Yeah, I'm not gonna install it globally, but I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to start some installs while we get going. Also, please be sure to make sure you like and subscribe. Always can use some more subscribers, and always love the likes. So first, let's start that install. What you'll notice already over here is it needs a seed file, and so here I have some posts with some users associated to the post, which is the default data that we'll be working with in our GraphQL database. And so once again, this is JSON GraphQL Server. Okay, now let's load the Apollo GraphQL libraries. We'll just copy the link directly from the documentation. Get that started. Okay, so now we have all of our libraries installed. Let's start to add our client. And as I said earlier, we're going to add our client inside of our main TS. So let's go to main TS. This is all your basic Ionic code. And here's where we want to start to, let's just, like I said, we're just going to follow along what we have in the documentation. So let's bring in over the Apollo stuff. Let's just copy all of this. The difference is for our GraphQL server that we're running, the URL is obviously localhost. So let's put this guy in here. That's where our server is. Let's save this guy. No issues found. We have our client. All right, now let's hop over to the documentation about using the composables. So let's see, where can we get to that? All right. So the other thing we need to do is we need to save Vue, install the composables. So let's switch over here, go back and add another library. And while that's installing, we will start to copy over the code. So you can see here we need to bring in provide, and we need to bring in the default Apollo client. So let's bring in the default Apollo client from Apollo Composables. Let's format this a little bit so we can see what we have going on. So there's the default Apollo client. We need to provide. So because we're going to do our setup like this. So what we can do is we can do a little bit different because we can just hang our provide right in here. We can do this. So just go like that. Ooh, get that out of there. There's our Apollo client. The default Apollo client comes from here, and we should be all set. All right. So we have my Apollo client set up. We have no errors. Let's get the server started that we spoke about that we needed before. So let's clear this. You saw we have our database here. We're going to start up our GraphQL server now. Okay, here's how you start your server. So now my GraphQL server is up and running. Let's go back and look at my tools. And when I execute my query for all posts, you see I get my data. There's my IDs, there's everything. All right. So we know about our GraphQL server is up and running. Now let's try to do something with the data. Now so we've done all that setup. Now let's actually get to some code. All right. So we've injected our client, so we have access to our client in our app. So now let's try to set up this first tab 1, which should list my data. So let's switch over to tab 1. And let's start to put some code down and see what we get here. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to do our first query. And to do a query, we need to take advantage of the hooks that are made available to us. So let's just copy them over. So in our setup up here, so inside of Vue Apollo Composables, there's a use query. And the way you use the use query is we're going to set it up right up here at the top. And I've already figured out exactly what my query is, so I don't have to retype all of it for you. So I'm just going to copy and paste my query in over here. We'll put it outside at the top as a constant. So this, it looks like I'm missing an import. So let me import my GraphQL tag from the Apollo client core. All right, so this is my query, which should give me all of my posts. And so now I have my query set up. And then I want to use the use query composable that's available. So let's set that. So let's say const st, and then we're going to get a bunch of stuff back from this use query. There you go. And for the use query, you need to specify the query you want to call. The query that we want to call is this all post query. So let's bring this down in here. And we want to execute this all post query. And then out of the all post query, there's a couple of things we want. So clearly we want the result. We want the error, which is any error. And we want to know if you're loading. Actually, we're going to ignore the loading for now. So these are basically the two things that we want from our query. We want to know if there's an error, and we want the data that's the result. So let's format this document. Let's set our query. And let's remove data here, and we're going to set result is what we're going to pass back, right? And so now we pass the result back from my query, and we can go up in here and we can change my template to take the result. What you need to know is that if we look at our query, my data is going to come back as all posts. So I need to say result and then say result posts item. And then how am I going to make sure that this thing doesn't die on me if it doesn't get any data back? So let's just check. So we're only going to do this list. Let's do a vif. Vif all result all posts. So only if I have something. Okay, anyway, so you can see I'm getting my two results back. Where do these go? So say item.id item title. So we get the two guys that we want. We have our first two, right? So that was pretty straightforward. So they also provide a little helper function, or not function, but another kind of helper composable called useResult. So what we can do with, so I already imported, what we can do with useResult is we can clean up this kind of all post stuff. So if we say down here, we say this, we say const all post, because we know that's what we're looking for, equals useResult. Also, what useResult will do, it'll try to determine that what we really want is all posts. So let's see if it can figure it out. So if I just put result in here, and then I just return all posts now instead of result. We switch this to all post. We swear, where else am I? We remove result. We just say all post. Just say all post. And let's see. And everything works just as before. So it was smart enough to, by just passing the results in, like, to figure out that what I really wanted was the all post property off of the results, and that gives me back the data. So that's a nice little helper that you get there. We don't need this ref here anymore. And I don't think we really need to use the router. So we can kind of clean this up. It's pretty nice and neat. We get some great GraphQL query functionality by just using these two. So this is the basic part. So we get a simple list here. What we want to do is we want to be able to add items to this list. So, and we're going to add items to the list in the next tab. So let's go over to tab 2. As you can see on tab 2 right now, I just have an add an item and I have a button that I want to click. And with GraphQL, to modify the data, it's actually called a mutation. So we're going to do some mutating here. And there is a use mutation composable. So let's take this use mutation composable and let's get started with that. Let's import our use mutation. So we start with our use mutation. And with the mutation, you need a mutation query. And so, once again, I typed that ahead of time so we don't have to go through typing all that now. More information on how to create these queries can be found in the documentation. The assumption here is you know GraphQL already. You're just trying to figure out how to implement it inside of your Ionic app. So we have our all post query, because we're going to need that again. And then we will need our all post mutation. And we're going to use the all post mutation to actually add items to my list. And what this says is it's going to be looking for a title property, an ID property. We're going to set the ID on the new post, and a user ID. We're going to just use one of the existing user IDs to make it simple, because we're just trying to show you how to get this integrated in Vue3. So now we have our actual mutation query. So we can go down to our code here, and let's start to add our mutation in. So you can see it's this so let's say const mutate, mutate equals use mutation. And then the first thing that you need to pass in is actually a query. And so we're going to say our add post mutation is our mutation. So that's just getting us started. So that's the first part of of my mutation. But we want to give okay, we're going to give our mutation a name. And what I want to do for my name is I'm going to use the name that exists here on a mutation. So we're going to say mutate, and we're going to give it the name create post. And then the next thing that we want to do with our mutation is we need to be able to get additional information back from it. So we want to know if there's any errors that happen. So let's add error. And I think that's enough for us to get it started. So if we look at our query, we see that you need to call create post with some parameters, and a parameter title, ID, and user, as I mentioned before. So down here inside of our add item, right, we need to call, so we're going to say create post, and create post needs a bunch of variables, and so we're going to put them in an object, and in that object the variables that we need are the title, the user ID, and an ID. So let's do this. ID is equal to new date. Let's wrap this. Get time. That should give me a unique number, and then I'm going to make it a string. So that will be my ID. The next thing we need is a title. So title.value. So let's switch this from item to title. Let's call this title. So we get the title as a title.value, and then the last one is the user ID. And like I said, we're going to use the users that existed already, so we'll start with Jane Doe. So let's take Jane Doe. We'll set the user ID to Jane Doe. And so these values, this ID, this title, and this user ID, they come from this add post mutation, which is a title, ID, user ID. Okay, so. Okay, error is assigned a value but never used. So let's put the title. We want to pass the title, and then we want to pass our error, and then add item. Okay, so if we go to add list, add is throwing errors. Let's see. Why is add not happy? Let's go look at my tools. My model is not title. Let's see if that cleans things up a bit. Okay, much better. Let's close this and get back to my window. So I have my list, which is my default query, and then I have add, which is just where I'm going to add an item. And so we have the title, which is just a text input we're going to take, which is associated to the model. When I click add item, I want to call my add item function. My add item function is down here, and my add item function will call my create post mutation. It will create an ID, it will pass the title, it will pass the user. And that is the first part, and then it should return null. So let's just give this a run and see what happens. So test 1. All right. Now let's reload this. And see, there's my new guy, test 1. See how annoying it is that I have to keep pressing test 1, test 2, and I have to refresh? So there's a couple of things you can do to address that. Where's tab 1? Why do I have all these windows open except the one I want? All right, tab 1. And we're going to utilize this refetch that we get from the use all query. We're going to leverage the lifecycle methods that come with VueJS, specifically Ionic framework, one of which is Ion Vue did enter. And what we're going to do with Vue did enter is we are just going to, inside of here, we're going to call this refetch. So whenever this view is entered, it will refetch the query if there's data from the query. So now if I go back to, let's save this. If I go back to add, and I say add another item added, I go to my list and add another is there because it's doing the refetch. Like I said, there's other ways to optimize this, but for the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish is to show you how to execute a query and mutate data with the add. I think this is good enough. So tab 1 is executing a query, getting results, getting potential errors, and tab 2 is doing a mutation. We have a mutation, the ability to pass parameters into the mutation. The database is updated, and then when we go back to our list, we see the updated data because we're calling the refetch. So that's really what I wanted to cover to get you started. There's some more interesting ways to kind of create a local cache and update the local cache with the mutation. That's actually covered in my older video, which I will link below. And it's also covered inside the use mutation documentation that's provided from the Apollo Composable. So once again, thanks again for stopping by, checking out this video, trying to push out a little bit more content to get people more engaged in the site. Please drop a comment, message, thought, like, subscribe, take care, and I will see you next time. Bye.